Riley's dipping her toes into commentary, apparently. Hi everyone, I'm back from the store, got my cigarettes, and I'm here for another video. Side note, I'm sorry if you guys hear my rats in the background. I just got 2 new ones because I'm psychotic. They're making a lot of noise. I'll try to like retake and try not to make it sound so crazy, but they're ravenous, so I've been watching a lot of commentary channels this year. Like, mostly commentary channels this year. Some of them more serious than others, but I've really been enjoying the critical content this year because I am a critical bitch. So I figured, hey, I'm stupid and opinionated enough to do this, so why the fuck not? That's not actually how it went down. But in all reality, I ingested a lot of content about specifically Shane Dawson this year after the events of last summer, which I will go over briefly, which made me reevaluate my stance on Shane and his legacy on YouTube. This also made me rethink about all the documentaries he did, including my favorite one, which was The Secret World of Jeffree Star. After rewatching the entirety of Shane and Jeffree's first series, my opinion on it has completely 180 shifted from being overwhelmingly positive with only a few negatives to overwhelmingly negative with only a few positives. Before getting into the series itself, I do want to discuss the controversy with Shane and Jeffree, but with mostly Shane. I will not give you a full rundown because that is too much fucking work. But I'll link a bunch of videos down in the description if you are interested in wanting to get more info on this, which you should, especially if you're a Shane and Jeffree stan, because I think it's important to understand what kind of people you are potentially supporting. At the time that this series first came out almost 3 years ago, public opinion on Shane Dawson and his content was very positive. Jeffree, however, not so much. He was a very successful beauty creator and the CEO of the monster brand Jeffree Star Cosmetics, but his past of being very problematic, racist, and generally being a fire starter had really damaged his image. This series came out, and it managed to paint Jeffree in a very different light. And with the help of Shane, Jeffree was on his way to being even more popular than he was before. But he wasn't just popular for being dramatic this time. He was popular because he was being genuinely loved by the community. Now, fast forward to the summer of 2020. This is when shit changes a little bit. For many a reason, Jeffree's past racism started getting pulled up again, except it was worse because a lot of it was recent. However, and unfortunately for Shane, since he and Jeffree were so closely tied together with the 2 series that they did, the multiple collabs, and the whole ass conspiracy collection that they created together, Shane's past content was also brought up and dragged up with him. I can't talk about everything that came up about Shane for the sake of time. He had so much of his content come out that was so problematic, but I will have linked down below D'Angelo Wallace's video that he basically chronicles all of the controversy that came out about Shane. I absolutely recommend that you watch that video if you still identify as a Shane stan, because that video single-handedly just changed my entire opinion on Shane. Thank you, D'Angelo, for your stellar content and reminding me that I've wasted so much money. After watching D'Angelo's video and many others after this, I can safely say that I can no longer support Shane. His platform was built on exploiting the oppression and the discrimination against others, and I morally just can't support a channel that I had no idea had such toxic roots. Same goes for Jeffree. I really like his makeup brand. His YouTube channel was kind of already on the decline for me, but I can't support Jeffree or his brand as well. I highly recommend you doing your own research and coming to your own conclusions. These are just my opinions based off of doing just that. So here we are, in the now. Both Jeffree and Shane's reputation are damaged beyond repair in my opinion, and we have the series, the one that started it all. I really want to take a critical look at this documentary and how exactly Shane created Jeffree's redemption arc, because it was really effective back in 2018. Let's just see if it's still effective after the metric shit ton of problematic shit that came out about the both of them. It's not, and I wasted a lot of money. Alright, episode 1, Secret World of Jeffree Star. Here we go. This first episode amassed almost 50 million views and 2 million likes. Shane's 2 biggest objectives in this documentary, other than just being Jeffree Star for the day, is to find out if Jeffree is indeed a monster and to find out how he got so rich. Granted, both prompts I found really interesting when I watched this the first time, But I do find it really telling that Shane sets Jeffree up immediately as being this monster, because realistically, it's going to be hard for Jeffree to live up to that. Just as long as Jeffree Star doesn't open the door to his mansion wearing a fucking Confederate flag robe and screaming the N-word, no one's going to think he's a monster in this personal of a context. This immediately sets up Jeffree's redemption arc, because as long as he isn't a monster, then he's redeemable. When Shane first started mentioning Jeffree's sketchy past, he brought up sources like TMZ, Perez Hilton, and I don't know if he meant it to come across this way. This could be just kind of petty, but it does seem to me that he's doing this as a way to diminish Jeffree Star's actions as being nothing more than just tea. This man said the N-word several times. He was anti-Semitic and generally was known for being discriminatory towards people of color. This isn't tea or gossip like the sources like TMZ or Perez Hilton might make you think. Shane tried to play himself as the everyman, saying that he was really intimidated and scared to meet Jeffree. I'm not saying that isn't genuine, because it very well could be, and I know that I would definitely be fucking terrified if I ever met Jeffree Star, but it does allow the audience to very easily situate themselves in Shane's shoes. I will say, it did bug me the first time watching this, seeing Shane acting like this is the first time him meeting Jeffree, or this was the first time him driving to and seeing his house, when they had collaborated very recently before this video happened. Seeing that the first watch was easy enough for me to just kind of look past, because again, I was a stan, but now it's really annoying to see him react to things knowing that he's seen them before. I will give a plus to Shane in this episode, that I do feel like he was being very likable when he wasn't playing poor and severely downplaying how rich he actually is, which did happen a lot. Take that how you will. Some of the editing in this video was also just so obnoxious, with the scary music, random cut-ins to random videos and such. This is a constant criticism throughout this whole documentary. I could bring it up every episode, but I won't. Just know that it's always there. Another positive of this series is that Shane and Jeffree really do have good chemistry. There were several moments in this episode and just in the series as a whole where I did physically laugh out loud. And I'm really embarrassed to admit that. Both of them together were able to provide a lot of fun commentary during this episode, which was good because not a whole lot was happening. This episode was mostly just a house tour, which when it came out I thought was really cool because I watched Jeffree. But if anyone watching had no clue who Jeffree Star was, I'm sure this was so ungodly boring to them. There's so much flexing in this episode, so much wasted money, that it does seem like they're trying to portray Jeffree as unlikable, which is so strange. However, I guess from a fan's perspective, it does add to the question of how much money Jeffree had and how did he accumulate it. Side note, watching this episode again really made me miss Nate. Like, holy shit. Nate was Jeffree's boyfriend at the time that this was being filmed, and he's just so soft-spoken and humble, and in my opinion, he did a lot to better Jeffree Star's image, not only in this series, but also just generally in the public eye. We miss you, Nate. What a good straight gay boy. Alright, on to episode 2, Becoming Jeffree Star for a Day. I just want to say, starting off, James Charles being in this episode was so uncomfortable. Them talking about being friends was just so strange. Like, I don't want to talk about James any more than I have to, because the man has straight up admitted to being a predator. He's just so problematic that I guess it only makes sense that he made a cameo in this mess. I know Shane gets a lot of criticism for his series being super long-winded, especially with like the Jake Paul series or the second Jeffree Star series. This episode, episode 2, is what I would consider the main filler episode of this series. All that really happened was Shane got transformed into Jeffree, they briefly talk about coming out of scandals, and they discuss Jeffree's music career and pretend as if it's good and before its time. Fuck me, I'm a celebrity, can't take your eyes off me, I'll make you fuck me just to get somewhere. Fuck me, I'm a celebrity, can't take your hands off me, I know you wanna suck me, what you waiting for? Olivia Rodrigo who? Anyways, back on point. I think that Shane doesn't cut the filler out of his episodes because it's very important in de-villainizing the subject of the video, whether it be Jake Paul or in this case Jeffree Star. All of this wasted time of them just standing around talking, laughing, etc. allows for the audience to just gradually forget or separate the Jeffree on screen from the Jeffree screaming the N-word. I think this was intentional in making his redemption arc very, very strong. Also, Jeffree talking in this episode about him being his authentic self and always being honest really is hilarious in hindsight, knowing just how much he lies. Also, when he said he would have slept with Shane when he was overweight in high school because there was more of him to love, after Jeffree fat shamed the ever-living shit out of Nikki tutorials, really did teleport me to Mars, I'm not gonna lie. Episode 3, Switching Lives with Jeffree Star. The first half of this video is just filler and just flexing. However, the flexing of Jeffree Star's designer bags, Gucci tracksuits, and luxury cars is used to continue circulating this question of how much money he exactly has and where it's all coming from. Or whatever. I don't know. I'm just assuming it could literally just be because expensive things are fun to look at. I don't fucking know. Nothing really starts being interesting in this episode until they make it to Jeffree's fulfillment center for Jeffree Star Cosmetics. No one up until this point ever saw the level that Jeffree Star Cosmetics was functioning at. However, to be fully honest, I wasn't surprised to see how massive his distribution center was because I was fully understanding how wildly successful Jeffree Star Cosmetics was. Doesn't mean it wasn't interesting to see, I just saw it coming. I think since I wasn't surprised by the size of the distribution center, I found all of Shane's comments being so shocked to just be a little bit out of touch. I understand that at this point, Shane wasn't fully involved in the makeup world and maybe didn't fully understand how big Jeffree Star Cosmetics was, but just his level of shock and awe at a certain point just kind of pissed me off. Yeah, this episode really does have the best, most interesting parts of the whole series, in my opinion, apart from one section in the finale that I'll touch on. But this business side of Jeffree Star Cosmetics was by far the most well done aspect of this entire documentary. This is also the episode where the question of where all of Jeffree's money comes from is finally answered. He has the Jeffree Star YouTube channel and all the money he gets from that. He has Jeffree Star Cosmetics, killer merch, a shipping fulfillment center, and several properties that equate to hundreds of millions of dollars in income, which is fucking insane. That part shook me when I first watched this, and it continues to shooketh me. So Jeffree said the phrase more money, more problems. And I know that within the context that he said it, he was trying to make it sound less problematic, but it still did. Look, I can understand. Okay, not really, but like, but I suppose I can sympathize with the struggle of having people leech off of you and losing friends and family because of that. But he is still a millionaire times fucking 100 at minimum. There's a way to talk about how leeching and using people for their money is fucked up without having to say more money, more problems. Because in all reality, if he was that upset about it, he could donate $99 million to charity and still live more than comfortably off of the $1 million left over. I blindly fell right into this documentary's trap when I first watched it. I was like, oh no, poor Jeffree, people using him for his hundreds of millions of dollars. He's not a monster, he's just misunderstood. Oh my god. Alright, episode 4, The Secret Life of Jeffree Star, finale part 1. This episode focuses on Jeffree meeting Shane's friends and all of them going to Jeffree's makeup lab. I thought episode 2 was the filler episode, but fuck, this is a strong competitor. Like, there is so much filler in this episode. Firstly, Garrett Watts is in this video, and he's probably the best person to ever exist in Shane's life. I won't spend this whole section talking about Garrett as much as I would love to, but just know he's an endlessly lovable humanoid yellow lab. The little glimpse that they showed of the Jeffree Star Cosmetics lab was admittedly really cool to see. The literal rest of this video is just foreshadowing for the conspiracy collection. There's no way of knowing if Shane and Jeffree already had a plan to do some kind of collection before this series, or if this conversation candidly happened actually like how it was portrayed in this documentary, and from that conspiracy was just born. The world may never know. But obviously watching this with the foresight of how wildly successful that collection was, obviously, it was a little bit nutty to see. Side note, please no one ask me to review the second Jeffree Star series because, again, I don't think I can do it. This series, this first one, dragged so much. I can't nosedive into a 7-part documentary where each episode is at minimum an hour. Alright, last and final episode, guys. Episode 5, The Truth About Jeffree Star, finale part 2. This episode starts off with an ad for BetterHelp, And if that isn't a fucking omen with how poorly handled the heavy and serious subjects in this video are, then I don't know what is. This is the episode that I have the most to talk about, since this is where the redemption arc comes fully into play. The finale focuses on Jeffree visiting his old apartment, and finally, Jeffree and Shane talking about his problematic past. Okay, so they were at Jeffree Star's old apartment, and it was so nice. Like 2 bedrooms and a loft, and he's playing this off as small. I understand that they're in California and their definition of small and humble is much different than mine, but I don't know, maybe don't pretend that this was a small ass, humble ass apartment when you're trying to convince the internet that Jeffree came from rags to riches, you know? Now, finally, kids, after 151 minutes of fucking around, Shane finally says the word racism. Jeffree addresses the 2 main videos that sparked his racism controversy. He gave some context and somewhat of an explanation for them. There are so many videos, photos, and comments Jeffree Star has made that are problematic. It's not just this one N-word video in the battery acid clip. I think he chose these 2 to focus on because they were the easiest to come up with excuses for. Jeffree then made the bold claim that since he yelled the N-word at white women, then it clearly wasn't about race. Because, as we all know, Jeffree Star has never said anything racist to a woman of color, like calling Jackie Ina a monkey. No, not real, does not exist. The way both of them totally diminished how problematic and bigoted Jeffree Star was in the past, and fuck it, still was at the time of filming this, was so uncomfortable to watch. Looking back at this, I really did believe it was only those 2 clips and him being generally petty, and that was why everyone thought he was a monster. No. Jeffree has a past with posing with Confederate flags, swastikas, and allegedly, even at this point in time of filming, was still using the N-word in text. It's really upsetting knowing how much they chose not to talk about in this sit-down moment because they wanted to successfully create a redemption arc, and they did. The way that Shane said that they both had drama-related stuff in common really did send me. It was so gross that he equated all of their messy, problematic past to being emotionally hurt. You guys are like 30. You should have learned a long time ago that regardless of how hurt you are, that gives you no right to be racist or otherwise horrible. Them normalizing this petty, snippy behavior that Jeffree gets into with literally every beauty influencer that ever existed. When Shane and Jeffree are 2 grown men over a decade removed from high school bullshit like this is brave, to say the least. Okay, so this next section I want to start out with a trigger warning because they didn't. I'll be talking about Jeffree Star's past with self-harm and how he showed his scars in this video. I'll try my best to keep the conversation as non-triggering as possible, but if you think that this topic is going to affect you in any kind of bad way, I'll add a timestamp here of when I'm done talking about this if you just want to skip past it. Long story short, if you want to know my feelings, I'm still really mixed and conflicted about the whole section. Part of me really likes it, part of me doesn't, but I am angry with Shane with how he handled this topic. Alright, here we go. Jeffree opened up with the fact that he had self-harmed really bad when he was in high school. He had to wear full-length pants and sweatshirts during the summer and went on to cover his entire body in tattoos to not only cover up his scars, but to bring beauty back to his body when he thought that he had none. This conversation, admittedly, is very difficult for me because same. But this conversation is also part of the reason why I have so many strong feelings about this documentary now and when I first watched it. While back then when I first watched this conversation propelled me into stanhood for Jeffree, now it makes me legitimately sad that Jeffree turned out to not be a good person at all. I'm sure that some people will equate this addition to the documentary as a way to redeem Jeffree even more, and even though it did function in that way, I really want to believe that that wasn't the intention at the time of filming this. Maybe that's me gripping on to any semblance of humanity I have for both of these people, but I refuse to think that they are using his self-harming past as a way to get rid of his racist one. When I tell you that when I first watched this, I was sobbing, I'm not kidding. Because for the first time in my life when I saw this, I saw someone who was talking about my shit so accurately to how I was experiencing it. Before this, I only had Demi Lovato, but the issue is that self-harm wasn't their main struggle like it was for me. Their main struggle was their eating disorder and their drug abuse. Not anything against them, because this is how it is for most public figures that talk about their self-harm, which is already so little. For them, it was a stepping stone to something worse. like an eating disorder or drug abuse. Self-harm was never and is never talked about as being anyone's worst issue, even though it was very much, for me, my worst issue, as well as several other people that I know. And then Jeffree came out in this video and talked about his self-harm, and it was portrayed in this episode as his worst issue, which was and is the only time I've ever seen that. Seeing it today, it's still, after everything that I've learned about him, about how garbage of a person he actually is, manages to make me really relate to him. Because seriously, I've never seen my experience and my feelings about my experience so accurately explained and shown. Again, I just wish I could still support Jeffree, but I can't because he's trash. Not for this, obviously, you know, just for everything else. My main issue with how Jeffree's self-harm was portrayed is entirely on Shane. Firstly, no trigger warning. There was a vague one in the very beginning with the BetterHelp sponsorship, but he just said that they were going to talk about some dark and sensitive stuff, which isn't even a little bit helpful when in all reality, the darkest stuff in this section had nothing to do with what they were talking about. Jeffree, legitimately, shows Shane and in turn the audience his self-harm scars. Yeah, which is incredibly triggering. Again, I don't think that this is on Jeffree. It's his body, and if he feels comfortable enough to show that, then he has every right to. This is totally Shane's fault for not clearly disclosing the triggering content in this video. And I truly feel that he did this because he cared more about the dramatic reveal of Jeffree Star being a former self-harmer than he does about the mental health and safety of his audience. Also, learning moment, okay? If someone ever shows you their self-harm scars, don't yell what the fuck at them like some kind of asshole. I understand from watching Shane for a really long time that he handles his discomfort through humor, and fucking same. But if you want to provide a safe space for not only Jeffree, but everyone else who's watching this video who's affected, maybe you should bite your tongue and take this shit more seriously. Don't laugh about the fact that you didn't think he would do that, and laugh when he's opening up about an extremely difficult and traumatic time in his life. Shane should have been more responsible when handling this series of material, not just with the self-harm, but also with the racism. He's trying to play the innocent everyman, but it was his responsibility in this documentary to give both of these subjects the seriousness and time that they deserve, and he personally failed on both, in my opinion. I find it really interesting that they saved this real talk about Jeffree's past for the very last episode in the series. I think looking back more critically at this was very intentional. We just spent over 2 hours in the previous episodes looking at Jeffree from a personal angle, seeing him apart from this YouTube persona and seeing him interacting with our everyman Shane and being generally pleasant, funny, and welcoming to be around. Then Shane, in this last episode, reminds everyone of Jeffree's past, and they managed to diminish it into non-existence because the audience was being gaslit for the last 4 episodes. They could have so easily had this conversation in the first episode, and then as the series continued, we gradually saw Jeffree was a changed and better person, which he wasn't, but I digress. But having this racism conversation at the very end of the series, coupled with the discussion of his self-harm and depression, completely undercuts and undervalues the severity of his racist behavior to the point that it made it totally and completely irrelevant. I and so many other people fell for this shit so hard, and it's really upsetting looking back and realizing that I got gaslit, and I was convinced that this was everything problematic about Jeffree, and I related to him so hard on his mental health struggles that I immediately looked past all of his racism and fell for this fake Jeffree that was created in this documentary. I'm still really mad when I think about this series as a whole because Shane and Jeffree did such a good job at manipulating the audience into believing this is who Jeffree was, and I fucking wish it was. I fucking wish that this was the truth, but it just isn't. I want to close off this video with saying that I read some of the recent comments in the finale episode of this series, and it's genuinely off-putting how many people are still watching and still are actively getting their opinions changed about Jeffree. A comment that really fucked me up said, and I quote, "Listen, I'm watching this again, and it's just as heartbreaking as it was when it first came out. No one is perfect, and I love Jeffree no matter what. And I feel for Shane so much, especially now. Everyone with shitty things to vomit to the universe needs to take a step back and really evaluate your own issues." This was posted 1 month ago. The series came out 3 years ago. So much to unpack. Firstly, let's start with the petty shit. Everyone with shitty things to vomit to the universe. You do realize that the queen of shitty comments constantly being vomited out into the universe is the subject of this documentary, right? Also, it's not as if the criticism that Jeffree and Shane received wasn't justly deserved. Again, watch the videos in the description. The stuff against both of them wasn't petty tea, especially for Shane. All of this just culminates to the idea of loving someone no matter what. Standing someone regardless of how racist, sexist, homophobic, predatory, or otherwise problematic they were in their past. Stan culture, in my opinion, is the reason why Jeffree and Shane got away with being shady people for so long. It's the reason this series led to the redemption of Jeffree Star. There were people who saw right through this documentary when it first came out because they weren't stans of Jeffree, Shane, or either of them. It's sad to come to terms with the fact that I contributed to both of these toxic people gaining so much success. But that was the point. That's the whole point of this series. Shane knew that he could save Jeffree, and I think he also knew that he and Jeffree could make a lot of money together. And they knew that they could make money off of the stanhood of their fans. It's just really unfortunate that I picked two very bad people to stan. The idea that we will stan a creator no matter what is juvenile, and we all collectively as a YouTube audience need to grow the fuck up from it. I watch a ton of different YouTubers now. A lot of commentary channels that offer a critical look at a lot of the influencers trying to pull the same shit, trying to abuse the existence of stan culture to get away with fucked up stuff. And it helped me come to terms with my feelings about Shane, Jeffree, and this series as a whole, which is, it is perfect propaganda in redeeming someone who has no reason to be redeemed with a host that is just as fucked as its subject. And with that, kids, that's the fucking video. Obviously a different style of video for me, but I honestly really enjoyed this kind of style, enjoyed being able to like speak my mind about things that are more serious, being able to open up myself about my own bullshit. So if you guys have any suggestions about what you want me to talk about, please let me know. Sound off. I'd love to keep talking. Got so much to talk about. Full of opinions. I don't know how useful the like and dislike is, or even subscribing at this point. You can do it if you feel so inclined, or you could fucking not, and I would be just fine about it. I still don't really have an outro, so bye.